If Canada were to become the 51st state in the United States, it would represent a significant geopolitical, economic, and cultural transformation. Here are some of the key implications and potential outcomes. 1. Political structure and governance. Representation. Canada would gain representation in the U.S. Congress, with 2 senators, as every state has, and a number of representatives based on its population, likely between 30 to 40 representatives. This would change the balance of power in both the Senate and the House of Representatives. Governance and laws. Canada would no longer have a separate government or parliament. It would be governed by U.S. federal laws, and Canadian provincial laws would be replaced with state-level laws that align with U.S. standards. Statehood process. The process for joining the U.S. as a state would involve approval from both Canadian citizens through a referendum and U.S. Congress. There would likely be a constitutional amendment to accommodate the new state. 2. Cultural and social impact. Cultural integration. While Canada shares many similarities with the U.S. in terms of language and cultural values, there are distinct Canadian identities, e.g., bilingualism, healthcare system, and social policies that would need to be reconciled. The merging of 2 diverse cultures would likely result in changes to Canadian traditions, government-funded healthcare, and bilingualism. Language. Canada is officially bilingual, English and French, and this may require the U.S. to make adjustments in official languages and services, especially in provinces like Quebec. This could influence U.S. laws and regulations around language usage. 3. Economic consequences. Currency and economy. Canada would adopt the U.S. dollar as its official currency. Canadian businesses would likely integrate more closely into the U.S. economy, leading to changes in trade, labor, and investment flows. The integration of Canada's resource-based economy, oil, forestry, mining, into the U.S. economy could be economically beneficial for both nations, but may also lead to challenges in terms of regional economic disparities. Healthcare. Canada's public healthcare system, which is a point of national pride, would likely be replaced by the U.S. healthcare system. This would be a significant shift, especially considering the U.S.'s more privatized and for-profit healthcare structure, potentially leading to debates about healthcare access and equity. Trade. As part of the U.S., Canada's international trade agreements, like NAFTA/USMCA, would automatically be covered under U.S. treaties, which could shift some trade dynamics, particularly with other countries like China or the European Union. 4. Defense and security. Military. Canada would become subject to U.S. military defense agreements and operations. This could strengthen the North American defense posture, but would also reduce Canada's autonomy in defense matters. National security. Canadian intelligence and security services would be integrated into U.S. systems. This could lead to stronger cooperation on counterterrorism and intelligence, but might also raise concerns over national sovereignty and privacy. 5. International relations. Diplomatic ties. Canada would no longer have its own independent foreign policy, and its relations with other countries would now be determined by U.S. foreign policy. This would impact Canada's diplomatic relationships, especially with countries that have historically had strong ties to Canada, e.g., the United Kingdom, France, and some Commonwealth nations. UN representation. Canada currently has a seat at the United Nations and other international organizations. As part of the U.S., Canada would no longer have independent representation at the UN and would be represented solely by the U.S. 6. Impact on Canada's regions. Quebec. Quebec, which has a strong French-speaking population, would face significant cultural and political changes as it would be integrated into the U.S. system, likely leading to debates about the preservation of French culture and language in the region. Indigenous issues. Indigenous communities in Canada would now fall under U.S. jurisdiction, and their rights and land claims would need to be addressed within the framework of U.S. federal law. This could lead to legal and cultural challenges. 7. Public opinion and political will. Canadian sentiment. Canadians have historically shown strong national pride, and the idea of becoming part of the U.S. would be met with considerable resistance. Issues of sovereignty, identity, and governance would be key points of contention. U.S. sentiment. Many Americans might see Canada's inclusion as a positive economic or strategic move, especially in terms of natural resources and expanding the size of the country. However, there may be opposition from those who view it as too complicated or unnecessary. 8. Legal and constitutional changes. Constitutional amendment. To make Canada the 51st state, the U.S. Constitution would need to be amended, which requires significant political and legal procedures. Rights and freedoms. Canada's Charter of Rights and Freedoms would be replaced by the U.S. Bill of Rights, which might cause tensions over individual freedoms and rights that are currently viewed differently in the two countries. Conclusion. While it's a highly speculative and unlikely scenario, if Canada were to become the 51st state, it would be a monumental shift for both countries. The integration would require massive adjustments in terms of governance, culture, economics, and international relations. It would likely be met with resistance from both Canadian citizens and U.S. citizens, given the complexity of merging two sovereign nations with distinct identities. However, the potential for increased economic integration, geopolitical influence, and military strength could be seen as positive outcomes for both nations.